Hi guys, dolls, and everything in between. Welcome to my second ever doll customizing video. If you watched our previous videos, you know that the theme for this doll is autumn. I wanted to do a harvest doll of sorts and also something in a indigenous tradition. So after doing a lot of research, I decided to base a doll around the mythology of Selu or Silu, the corn mother in Cherokee mythology. Like all my doll customs, I started with a sketch of the doll I wanted to make. I did a few weeks of research to make sure that the colors and patterns were being used appropriately. Below, I've linked all of the resources I used as well as the people that helped me. First, we're going to start with the body. I got a made-to-move dancer Barbie, so it has great articulation and can do some amazing poses. Oh, it's so cool. Her arms even twist. First, we're gonna have to sand her down. I usually start with like a 400 grit and move down from there. So the higher the number, the more grit it has and the softer it is. I also like using these sanding sticks for the super hard to reach places, like the joints. Once she's sanded, I wipe her with 75% alcohol wipes to get rid of dust. Then I spray her with Tester's Dull Coat. I noticed after spraying her that there were a couple white sanding marks, so I wanted to try a technique of gently blushing her with pastels. I was hoping that it would fill in the white marks with a lot of pastel to kind of fill in where the plastic was still scratched. And then once it's filled in, just removing any excess with a kneaded eraser. So it keeps the color, but it doesn't leave a big dark splotch. After I fix the white marks, it's just blushing the rest of her body, which means trying to blush these insane joints. Then it's a little bit of blush on her hands. I will say blushing the hands is my favorite part. Then it's one last spray of Tester's Dull Coat over the whole thing to seal everything in. Sometimes I wonder if my neighbors can see what's in my window when I do this. As the body dries, we should work on the dress. Now I wanted to try a new technique that I use for cosplay to see if it could help me make patterns for doll clothes. I used this method to make this gauntlet. For this process, you're going to need your doll body, plastic wrap, and some tape. Your first step is to wrap your body in plastic wrap. Depending on what you want, I wanted a dress. You could do a shirt or maybe pants, but we wanted to make this simple. So I wrapped the entire thing in plastic wrap. This will prevent the tape from leaving any marks behind. Once you like the way the plastic is set, cover it with tape. Front and back. Once it's covered, you're going to slice it down the back. Be careful not to push too hard. And she's free! And we should have a pretty good pattern. Let's take it to the fabric and see if it works. Yay, it worked! Awesome! This is definitely a technique that I'll use in the future. Especially for simple dresses and simple shirts and whatnot. For the accents of the dress, I wanted to use this ribbon that I found. So I'm going to fabric tack that to the fabric I'm going to use for the fringe. This fringe is basically the same fabric as the dress, dipped in fray check, so it didn't fray. After sewing it all together, now it's ready for some beads. I tried to find some traditional beads for the tribe that I'm basing this doll on, but a lot of bead workers today don't make their own beads. So I talked to a few native and indigenous bead workers online and asked all the questions I needed to, and they recommended me some brands of beads I could use that are as close to traditional as possible. I also looked up the proper patterning and what each color meant because I wanted to treat this with the respect that it deserves. I wanted to appreciate, not appropriate. These really tiny ones are called seed beads. And so I was doing some simple accents, so it was basically lazy stitches, where I would just put them on the needle, put them through the thread, pull everything together. And make it as tight as possible. For the shawl, I really wanted to do some embroidery. With embroidery, they usually come with 6 lengths of thread that you can split to get various widths that you want. I'm going to use a simple 3 width on this purple line that I want across the front. So I start on the edge and do a simple line and fold over stitch. This will help lock the thread to itself and make sure there are no gaps. Then I just continue that along the entire front. For the triangles, it's going to be 3 layers of embroidery, so I start with a white layer going up and down. Then the blue layer is going to go left to right. Then after one small layer of purple in the front, it's done. Now to just repeat it about 7 more times. After all that, let's move on to the head. I'm always surprised at how many clumps can fit inside such a small head. Look at this pile of clumps! After all that's done, it's time to clean her up with some acetone. A little dip of it on a Q-tip to rub off the factory paint. And she's clean and ready for blush on her cheeks, on her nose, and on her ears. Also, a little bit of blush on her hairline to make it look a bit more real. When she's all blushed, it's time for watercolor pencils. I said this in my previous video that I'm not a big fan of drawing on the head. I like to wet my brush and paint on the watercolor pencils. I use that technique for both the eyebrows and a little bit of color on her lips. I don't want them too dark because I want to keep them natural, and she's not going to be wearing any makeup or lipstick. Once I've sprayed the head, it's time to move on to acrylics. White is always the hardest thing to paint on, so it's extremely watered down and takes a lot of layers to keep that smoothness to it, so it doesn't look all rough and grody. Also, trying to get the eyes the same shape is always a challenge. If I'm doing anything on the left side, I have a tendency to flip things over. It stops your brain from thinking of the object you're painting as only an eyeball and helps you focus more on the actual shape so that it matches what you painted on the right-hand side. It also makes the left-hand side so much easier to get to. Then it's time to put some acrylic in her eyebrows to make them stand out a little bit more. And the upside down trick works for eyebrows as well. Then, after one spray of Tesser's Dull Coat, it's back to watercolor pencils to accentuate the eyes and add very minuscule eyelashes. Like I said before, this doll will not be wearing makeup, so I wanted eyelashes to still be present because everybody has eyelashes, but they didn't have to be as heavy as if she were wearing mascara. One more spray and it's time to add her irises and her pupils. I went with a nice chocolate brown for her iris. It went with the overall tone of the doll. I always try my best to make sure they're at least looking in the same direction. I would hate to have a doll that looks like it has chameleon eyes. Unless that was what I was going for, which is not what I was going for with this doll. Because she's based on a mythological figure, I wanted to give a kind of ethereal sparkle to her eyes. So I'm using some greedy gold, very, very watered down, and painting it over the iris before I start painting on the pupils and the eye highlights. It gives her kind of a hazel eye tone and also sparkles in the right direction. Once that's dry and coated, it's time to paint her pupils. And her eye shines. In my drawings as well as on my dolls and sculptures, I like doing a 3 eye shines that change in gradient of color depending on what the iris color is. With the last one always being pure white. Pure white is one of the colors the human eye focuses on first. And when making a doll or drawing a person, you want them to see the eyes first. All it takes is one last coat of gloss varnish on her eyes. And she's ready for hair. For this hair, I decided to do an old technique that I learned from college, which is making hair out of hair extensions. I picked this brand of hair extension because I'm planning to use the hot knife to flatten them down. And it says that this particular hair can handle heat. To make the wefts, I'm going to cut off different chunks of the hair itself and paint some Elmer's glue all through the top to make them flat. When you make hair wefts like this, make sure to massage the glue through every bit of the hair weft on top. So the more excess glue in this phase, the better. I do this for every weft. You also want to give them, if not an entire day, at least a couple hours to dry completely. Once they're dry, it's time to fabric tack them to the head. They tend to lie flat, which is nice, and I used the hot knife technique to create a part up top. And once it's all down, you want to let it dry for an entire day before removing the head from your little styling stand and placing it on the body. Once the head is attached, I can start styling the hair. Braids are extremely significant in a lot of native tribes, as is hair in general, and I wanted to honor that by having these extremely long braids up in the front. Once the braids are done, the only thing she needs is her feather. I found this pack of miniature feathers at a craft store. Just needed to trim down a little bit. And attach to her hair with embroidery thread. I also used the embroidery thread to tie off her braids at the bottom. And she's done. I'm extremely proud of how this doll came out. I think she looks beautiful. The hair extensions came out great. I also wasn't in love with this head sculpt in the beginning, but after finishing the repaint, I kinda actually love it. And I love the little corn accessories. Once again, all the resources I used and all the people that helped me are in the description down below, as well as a few indigenous and native causes you can donate to. Thanks for watching my video. Keep it plastic!